The Philadelphia Eagles have traded for Green Bay Packers wide receiver Dontayvion Wicks, and I think this shows that A.J. Brown is getting traded post June 1st.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. On today's bonus show, we're talking about a big trade that Howie Roseman just made an hour ago. The Philadelphia Eagles are acquiring Green Bay Packers wide receiver Dontayvion Wicks for a 2026 fifth-round pick and a 2027 sixth-round selection. Dontayvion Wicks heading into his fourth year. He had a 5-touchdown season in 2024. He had over 580 yards in his rookie season of 2023 with 4 touchdowns on the year as well. The Eagles are also giving Dontayvion Wicks a $12.5 million contract extension for 1 year to keep him through both 2026 and 2027. This is not some John Mechie kind of trade. This is a pretty significant move in what it tells us about the future of the Eagles wide receiver position. For me, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, guys, I'm really sorry, but the A.J. Brown truthers out there that have been taking this victory lap all week because of the Diana Rossini, Mike Vrabel story that thought this trade was never going to happen, and the Rossini story confirmed it to you, I'm really sorry, but this kind of kills your momentum. I think this tells us that A.J. Brown is 100% without a doubt getting traded post June 1st. Now, is Dontayvion Wicks an A.J. Brown caliber player? No, absolutely not. But just think about it. If the Philadelphia Eagles plan to have A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith as the long-term future, considering the amount of targets those guys have eaten up over the last 4 years, on top of you brought back Dallas Goedert on a 1-year contract, you still have Saquon Barkley in the backfield, why would the Eagles be doing this much work at wide receiver, signing Hollywood Brown? That wasn't just a nothing signing. Trading 2 draft picks for Dontayvion Wicks, and not just trading 2 draft picks, but also giving him a contract extension worth $12.5 million. Like, that's not chump change for Howie Roseman. Why would they be doing that? Why would they be spending all of these top 30 visits on first and second round receiver prospects like Indiana's Omar Cooper, Louisville's Chris Bell? Why would there be insiders that believe the Eagles could look to trade up in the first round for somebody like Arizona State wide receiver Jordan Tyson? Considering how minimal of a role the wide receiver 3 spot has had for the Eagles in the A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith era, they would not be doing all of this work if they thought A.J. was coming back. I'm sorry. Like, I want A.J. Brown to be a part of the long-term future still for the Eagles as well. I wish everybody could sing Kumbaya, and I wish him and Jalen were still best friends. I wish A.J. was happy with winning and getting over 1,000 yards a year and being committed to changing this scheme the better and improving this passing game under Sean Mannion and a new West Coast system. But that is just not the case. Like, I know the Diana Rossini story definitely shows a lot of holes in her reporting about the story, in her motivations about constantly flooding your timeline with A.J. Brown rumors and speculation. She was definitely trying to help out the Patriots in trade leverage, but there was always a trade on the table. The Patriots GM confirmed it. The Rams GM confirmed it. The Eagles have never just shot it down and said A.J. is a part of the future long-term. And now you're signing a young wide receiver that is a bigger bodied guy, by the way. Dontayvion Wicks is 6'1", plays really well above the rim, a contested catch guy with good body control that can play the X. I think he complements what you have with shiftier, faster, smaller receivers and DeVonta Smith and Hollywood Brown. I think he's a good complement to that. I think he is the style of player. He's the similar build of A.J. Brown. He's not nearly the kind of player A.J. is, but he's a similar style. Like, come on. Read between the tea leaves. You guys have been watching and covering football probably just like me for a really long time. And I know there's a lot of denial going on, and I know a lot of you don't want to trade A.J. Brown, but it's happening. And Dontayvion Wicks is just another move to prepare for life after AJ. I think Dontayvion Wicks and Hollywood Brown are going to try to replace AJ's production in a committee approach. I do still think, though, the Eagles, they don't necessarily have to sign another receiver or trade for another receiver or draft another receiver in the early rounds, but I still think they should. And I'll tell you why coming up right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. First, today's episode of Locked On Eagles is presented by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes it's a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with stacks of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now is in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. So head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and to book your appointment. Guys, today's show is also presented by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, the inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure is on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. They help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that really says it all. In the quick minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show, you're going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Support our show by saying you heard about us through Indeed Locked On Eagles. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Wrapping up this bonus show for Friday, April 10th, the Philadelphia Eagles just traded for a wide receiver in Green Bay Packers, Dontayvion Wicks, who just also signed a $12.5 million one-year extension to stay with Philadelphia through 2027. This is not nothing. I think this is a substantial move in replacing A.J. Brown. Now, have the Eagles done a good enough job in replacing A.J. Brown so far with Hollywood Brown, with Dontayvion Wicks, re-signing Dallas Goedert, having DeVonta Smith in-house? Is that enough for 2026? I personally want a wide receiver to complement DeVonta Smith coming through the first or second round of the upcoming 2026 NFL draft. I would still love to trade up for Jordan Tyson or Omar Cooper Jr., or in the second round, go for somebody like Chris Bell from Louisville, Chris Brazzell from Tennessee, Ted Hurst from Georgia State. If Brian Thomas Jr. was still available for a trade, or Marvin Harrison from Arizona, I still think the Eagles should absolutely make that move. I don't think Dontayvion Wicks or Hollywood Brown precludes you from making that kind of move. I think in an ideal world, your top three receivers after AJ is traded post June 1st is DeVonta Smith as wide receiver 1, a rookie first or second round pick as wide receiver 2, and then you have a rotation at wide receiver 3 of Hollywood Brown and Dontayvion Wicks, which is perfect. You have a deep threat at wide receiver 3 in Hollywood. You have a bigger above the rim kind of player at 6'1" in Dontayvion Wicks. I kind of like having a committee approach at wide receiver 3 with different skill sets, and then 2 complete alpha receivers ahead of those 2 guys. I think ideally that would be my plan. If I was Howie Roseman, that would be my setup. But do I think they would be okay if this is what they have for 2026, and maybe they think about 2027 as finding their new A.J. Brown in that draft class? Yeah, I think they'd be fine. When you think about it from a numbers perspective of making up for the production A.J.'s had over the last couple years, which is a little over 1,000 yards and a lot of targets, an alpha number 1, you're not going to replace that. It's kind of like the Moneyball system. You're not going to replace that in the form of, just one guy. But let's say DeVonta Smith, instead of having 1,000 yards, now next year, maybe he has a JSN kind of season. Not saying he's going to have, over 1,500 yards on the year, but let's say he gets like 1,300 yards. So that's 300 more yards to make up for A.J. Brown's 1,000 walking out the door. So an extra 300 for DeVonta. And then when you think about it, the wide receiver 3 position, normally like Jahan Dotson, Quez Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus, those guys combined for what, like 300 total yards? I think there's a really good chance that Dontayvion Wicks and Hollywood Brown, they could maybe even double that. I think you're going to have from the wide receiver 3 position at least double what you've got from Jahan Dotson, from Olamide Zaccheaus, and old man Julio Jones and Quez Watkins. So let's say, A.J. Brown and Jahan Dotson walk out the door. That's about 12 to 1,300 yards leaving from last season, I think, and plus DeVonta Smith's 1,000. So overall, between those 3 spots outside of Dallas Goedert at tight end, your 3 receivers combined for about, 2,300 receiving yards. Let's say this year, DeVonta Smith's got 1,300 of that, right? So you just need 1,000 to make up for it. I could see Dontayvion Wicks and Hollywood Brown both surpassing 500 scrimmage yards, right? Or a rookie as well that comes in that's part of that committee, or, Darius Cooper. Maybe it's a bigger workload for a tight end 2 in the 12 personnel package next to Dallas Goedert. Maybe that comes in the form of like Max Clare or Oscar Delp from Georgia or Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt. I could see that. Saquon Barkley maybe being more involved in the receiving game to replace A.J. Brown. Like, again, I would love for that to be a stud rookie like Omar Cooper or Jordan Tyson. But maybe the Eagles see this kind of like a Moneyball situation where it's not just one guy replacing that production. It's kind of a committee approach. It's Dontayvion Wicks and Hollywood Brown. It's a bigger workload for DeVonta Smith. It's a bigger presence at tight end 2 in this rookie class. I could see that being the move, and kind of trying to build almost for Sean Mannion, who comes from the Green Bay Packers, trying to build that kind of receiving core where they have like a bunch of really solid 2s or 3s. Maybe they don't have a true number 1, but like Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontayvion Wicks, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden. Like they had 5 guys last year that were like really solid wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 caliber players. The Eagles could be looking to do that behind their number 1 in DeVonta Smith to replace A.J. Brown's numbers. And I could see that. And would they be okay this year considering everything else they have on their roster with also an improved scheme, an improved run game? Like, yeah, I think they could be okay there. I think DeVonta Smith, Dontayvion Wicks, and Hollywood Brown that's not a bottom tier wide receiver trio. That's a better wide receiver trio than a lot of offenses in the league. But for me personally, I hope this doesn't stop the Eagles from targeting a pass catcher in the first 2 rounds of wide receiver. So that's the way I see it. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds or at DBLCLOE. Until Monday, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Thanks for making Locked On the podcast network the number 1 in the world of sports. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.